I have spent most of my adult life surrounded by other people's stories. Every shelf in my shop is someone else's interior life, pressed flat and bound and given a spine. Fiction, memoir, natural history, poetry, all of it is just someone trying to say, here is what it felt like to be alive and paying attention. I had always found that comforting. The shop was full of people who had managed to finish something. I liked being near that. What I had not managed in 37 years was to finish a story of my own. I kept starting them. I kept setting them down. Her name was Sylvie, and she had been coming into my shop every single day for 6 weeks before she told me the truth about why. My name is Thomas Ellery. I was 37, and I owned a small independent bookshop in Asheville, North Carolina, which I had bought from the previous owner 9 years ago when she retired, and I had been 28, and possessed of the specific kind of confidence that comes from not yet knowing all the ways something can go wrong. The shop was called Ellery's because the previous owner had been named Ellery too, Margaret Ellery, and the sign was original and in good condition, and I had been told, correctly, that changing a bookshop's name was bad luck. I had kept it. The sign, the luck, all of it. The shop was on a narrow street 2 blocks off the main drag, the kind of street that gets afternoon light through one window and never the other, and smelled of old paper and the cedar blocks I kept on the shelves to discourage silverfish, and the very specific blend of coffee I made each morning from a machine behind the counter that I had bought used and repaired twice and would repair again before I replaced it because I am stubborn about functional things. Most of my days were simple: receiving, shelving, recommending, the particular quiet of a Tuesday when nobody comes in until 11 and you can hear the street sounds through the glass and not feel lonely about it. I had been running the shop for 9 years. I had been running my life for 37. Both were going roughly as planned, and I had made my peace with roughly. My last relationship had ended 3 years before this story starts. Not badly, but finally, which is its own kind of difficult. Her name was Claire, and she had been patient with me in ways I had not deserved and generous in ways I had not earned. And when she told me she was leaving, she did not say I had done anything wrong. She said I had done everything right, in the sense of correct, and that correct and present were not the same thing, and she needed the second one. I had stood in the kitchen of our apartment and understood her completely, and had nothing to offer against it. She was right. I had been managing the shop and managing my life and managing the relationship, and somewhere in all that management I had stopped actually being in any of them. After Claire, I moved into the apartment above the shop. I told people it was practical. It was also the first honest thing I had done in years, acknowledging that the shop was where I actually lived, and the rest of it had been a story I told to seem like a person with a life that extended beyond his inventory. I was not unhappy. That is the important thing to say. I had my shelves and my machine and my Tuesday mornings and my regulars, and I had enough to fill the days, and filling the days had started to feel like enough. I was like a man who had read so many accounts of other people's great loves that he had stopped noticing he was only ever the reader. It was comfortable in there, the light was good, the stories were excellent. Not because I was hiding, because I had stopped expecting anything to find me in there, and expectation is exhausting to maintain when the evidence keeps coming back inconclusive. And then Sylvie Marchand walked in on a Wednesday in September and asked where I kept the Marilyn Robinson. She was 34, I learned eventually, though she looked like someone who had stopped keeping close track of her own age because she had more interesting things to measure. She had dark hair cut short on one side, longer on the other, in a way that managed to look both deliberate and unconsidered, like a person who had made a strong aesthetic decision and then forgotten about it, which is the best way to wear any decision. She had paint on the back of her left hand the first time she came in, a smear of cadmium yellow that she had not noticed, or had noticed and chosen not to address. Her coat was the green of something that had been very good quality a long time ago and had been worn into something better. She found the Robinson herself before I had finished pointing. She stood in front of the shelf and tilted her head at the spines the way people do when they're reading multiple titles at once instead of choosing one, and then pulled out Gilead and held it against her chest with both hands without opening it. "I've read it 4 times, she said. "I just like to know it's here." That stopped me. Not the statement, the reasoning. People came into my shop to buy books, to find books. sometimes to return books they had read and couldn't keep. I had not had someone come in simply to confirm a book's location, like a person who checks on something they love without needing to do anything about it. Just verification. "It'll be here," I said. She smiled. One side more than the other. Good. She bought a different book. Left. I stood at the counter for a moment afterward, not thinking about anything specific, just aware that the shop felt different in a way I could not account for, and was not sure I wanted to examine. She came back the next day. And the day after that. By the second week I knew her order. Not coffee, she didn't take coffee, but the particular section she went to first, which was always fiction, always the middle of the alphabet, always a methodical left-to-right read of the spines, as though conducting an inventory she was personally responsible for. She would then pivot to the new arrivals table near the window, where the afternoon light came in on Tuesdays and Thursdays and made the room look like the inside of a painting, and stand there for between 4 and 9 minutes. I had stopped pretending I wasn't timing it, before selecting something or selecting nothing and coming to the counter. She bought something about 2/3 of the time. The other third she simply chatted, which I had started to understand was its own transaction, one I was increasingly willing to make. The chatting had a pattern too. She asked questions the way she read shelves, methodically, genuinely, not filling silence but finding things inside it. She asked how I had come to own the shop. She asked whether I had read everything in it, which I told her was physically impossible and which she clearly did not fully believe. She asked about the cedar blocks, what they were for, why cedar specifically, whether silverfish were a serious problem or a theoretical one. I told her they were a serious problem in a shop that had been standing since 1962, and that cedar was both effective and preferable to the alternatives, and she nodded as though filing this away for reasons of her own. In the third week she asked me to recommend something. Not a genre, not a mood, just, what would you give someone right now if you had to choose one thing? The question had a specificity to it that I registered but didn't comment on. I went to the shelf without deliberating and pulled out a novel about a woman who maps the coastlines of small islands that are disappearing under rising water. I handed it to her. She turned it over, read the back, looked up. "Why this one?" she said. "Because it's about paying attention to something before it's gone," I said. "And it's also very funny, which books about loss should always try to be." She held it for a moment. Then she set it on the counter and opened her bag to find her wallet. "You're good at this," she said. "It's what I do," I said. "No," she said, without looking up from her bag. "It's what you are." That got me quiet in a way I covered by processing her transaction more carefully than it required. She left. I shelved 2 books that did not need shelving, and thought about the distinction she had made. Not what you do, what you are. I had not been offered that distinction in a long time, and I was not sure I had earned it, and I found that I wanted to. She was an illustrator. She worked primarily in children's books, the kind of illustration that looks simple and is not, where the drawing has to carry the emotion the text can't hold, and the faces have to be both universal and specific at the same time. She talked about her work with the same quality she had looking at shelves, methodical, genuinely interested, not performing the interest. She had opinions about color and line weight and the specific challenge of drawing something true enough to make a child feel less alone in whatever they were feeling. "That's what good illustration does," she said once, standing at the counter while I was processing a shipment. I kept pausing. "It tells a kid, someone else saw this. Someone else knows what this looks like. That's what good writing does," I said. "Yes," she said. "That's why we get along." She meant the books and the illustrations. I noted that she had said we. By the third week I had started arriving downstairs 10 minutes earlier each morning, which I told myself was about the shipment schedule, and which was not about the shipment schedule. I had also started paying attention to which books she lingered over but did not buy, which I recognize in retrospect was the kind of observation a person makes when they have started compiling information about someone without admitting that is what they are doing. That got me thinking about Claire, about the distinction she had made, about correct versus present. I set the thought down and went back to the shipment. The 25% mark of something I wasn't calling anything yet arrived on a Thursday in the 4th week, when she came in with a portfolio under her arm and asked, with the particular directness she brought to most things, whether she could sit by the window table and work for an hour. I said yes. She worked for 2 hours and 40 minutes. I shelved, assisted 2 other customers, processed 3 online orders, and was aware the entire time of the specific quality of her concentration, the way she bent over the page, the slight movement of her mouth when she was deciding something, the fact that she had brought her own pencils in a tin that had been repainted at some point in a shade of dark blue and bore no other identifying marks. She did not ask me for anything during those 2 hours and 40 minutes. She did not seem to require anything. She was simply present, in my shop, doing her work, in a way that made the shop feel more like itself than it usually did. When she packed up, she came to the counter and said, "Thank you. This is a good place to think." "You're welcome here whenever you want," I said. She looked at me directly. "I know," she said, not with arrogance, with certainty, like someone stating a fact they had already verified. I watched her leave. The shop felt different again, the same way it had the first day. She came back the next day, and the day after that. By the 5th week she was at the window table on Thursdays and Tuesdays and a third day that varied, and I had stopped pretending the earlier mornings were about the shipments, and I had developed a specific habit of making a second cup of coffee and setting it near the end of the counter at the time she usually arrived, which I told myself was hospitality, and which was not only hospitality. By then I already knew that whatever this was, it had moved past the boundary of the explainable, past the point where I could locate it in any of the ordinary categories I had for the people who came into my shop, and the ways they mattered to me. I did not know what to do with that. I was better with other people's stories than my own. I always had been. The 6th week was a Tuesday. She came in later than usual, mid-afternoon, when the light was doing what it did in October through the west-facing window, long and amber and almost horizontal, cutting across the new arrivals table and catching the dust in the air above the shelves in a way that made the room look inhabited by something older than either of us. She stood at the door for a moment after she came in, and something in how she stood was different. Not the coat, not the portfolio, something in her posture that was resolved rather than arriving. She came to the counter. She did not go to the fiction section first. She did not go to the new arrivals table. She came to the counter and stood on the other side of it and looked at me with the same directness she brought to most things, except with more of it than usual. "I want to tell you something," she said. I set down what I was holding. "I've been coming in every day," she said. "I know. I come in a lot. You do." She looked at the counter for just a moment, then back up. "It's not the books." There it was, 3 words. Quiet. No apology in them. No performance. No hedge. Like a woman who had been carrying a sentence for 6 weeks and had decided today was the day she was going to set it down on the counter between them and see what happened next. My chest did something. I did not have a word for it. Something moved, rearranged, like a shelf that has been holding a specific weight for a long time and finally feels it shift. I said, "I know." She looked at me. "I started making a second coffee," I said. "I've been making it for 3 weeks. I didn't tell myself why." Her expression moved. The one-sided smile, but different. Fuller. "That's the most you've said at once," she said. "I'm better with other people's sentences," I said. "I know that too," she said. "I've been watching." I did not ask her to dinner that day. I want to be honest about why. Because the moment had its own weight, and I did not want to rush it into the next thing before I had finished being in it. That was new for me. I was a man who had spent 3 years after Claire efficiently moving through moments rather than staying inside them, and this one I wanted to stay inside. What I did was walk around the counter. That was the voluntary step forward, not dramatic, just physically closing the distance that the counter had been maintaining for 6 weeks. I stood on the same side of it as her and said, "Thursday. There's a place on Lexington that has good food and no televisions, which I have strong feelings about." She considered this. "How strong?" "Strongly in favor of their absence," I said. "The food also." That got the real smile. Both sides this time. "Thursday," she said. She did not buy anything that day. She left, and I stood in the shop and looked at the afternoon light cutting across the new arrivals table for a long time. Not because I was processing anything profound. Because I was a man who had been still for 3 years and had just in the space of 4 minutes become someone who moved. The difficult part came 6 weeks after Thursday. It came from inside her rather than outside either of us. which made it harder to respond to and more important to handle correctly. She told me, over dinner at the Lexington place for the 5th time, that she had a history of attaching herself to things that felt safe and stable, places, routines, consistent people, and that she was aware the shop had been that for her, and she was aware I had started to become that for her, and she needed to say that out loud because she did not trust comfortable things blindly anymore. I've confused warmth for home before, she said. I didn't want to do that without saying it. I listened to all of it. I did not offer reassurance. I knew what reassurance before understanding sounds like, and she deserved better. What's the difference, I said, between warmth and home, for you? She thought about it. Home is somewhere you're still welcome when you're difficult, she said. Then come back when you're difficult, I said. I'll let you know if that changes. She looked at me across the table with an expression that I had started to learn was her version of being moved. Not demonstrative, just very still, like someone pausing to take something in before they allow it to matter. That's the most important thing anyone has said to me in a long time, she said. Not because it was grand, because it was specific. Because she had told me what she needed and I had answered the actual question, instead of the easy one. I drove home that night the long way, through the neighborhood with the big sycamores that go silver in headlights in October, and I thought about Claire's distinction, correct versus present. I thought about how I had been managing things for so many years, the shop, the inventory, the careful professional distance between myself and anything that required me to be fully there, and how much of that management had simply been the architecture of a man who had decided that finishing things was for other people, the people on the shelves, not the man behind the counter. I had been wrong about that. I had been wrong about it for a long time, and Sylvie Marchand had walked in on a Wednesday in September and made the wrongness very hard to continue. The difficult part came 6 weeks after Thursday. It came from inside her rather than outside either of us, which made it harder to respond to and more important to handle correctly. She told me, over dinner at the Lexington place for the 5th time, that she had a history of attaching herself to things that felt safe and stable, places, routines, consistent people, and that she was aware the shop had been that for her, and she was aware I had started to become that for her, and she needed to say that out loud because she did not trust comfortable things blindly anymore. I've confused warmth for home before, she said. I didn't want to do that without saying it. I listened to all of it. I did not offer reassurance. I knew what reassurance before understanding sounds like, and she deserved better. What's the difference, I said, between warmth and home, for you? She thought about it. Home is somewhere you're still welcome when you're difficult, she said. Then come back when you're difficult, I said. I'll let you know if that changes. She looked at me across the table with an expression that I had started to learn was her version of being moved. Not demonstrative, just very still, like someone pausing to take something in before they allow it to matter. That's the most important thing anyone has said to me in a long time, she said. Not because it was grand, because it was specific. Because she had told me what she needed, and I had answered the actual question instead of the easy one. That was 14 months ago. She works at the window table on Tuesdays and Thursdays still, and some Wednesdays, and the occasional Saturday when she has a deadline she needs the room to finish. I make the second coffee without asking. She has started bringing 2 tins of pencils, which I have cleared a drawer for behind the counter because the surface was getting crowded and the pencils needed a home. The drawer has her name on it, in a label I made with the same label maker I use for the shelves, because I believe in things having a place, and because some things deserve to be labeled. She finished a book in the spring, 32 illustrated pages for a story about a child who collects things that don't match and makes something beautiful anyway. She brought me the advance copy the day it arrived and set it on the counter without ceremony and said, "Page 12." Page 12 was a spread of a small room full of shelves. A person behind a counter, slightly blurred at the edges the way illustrators sometimes blur the things that matter most, as if they've been looked at so long they've gone soft. A window with afternoon light coming through it at a specific angle, the amber kind, the October kind. "That's this shop," I said. "Yes," she said, "that's me." "Yes," she said, "I drew it from memory. I've been looking at it long enough." I held the book for a moment. It had the specific weight of something that had been made carefully and with full attention, the kind of weight that good things have when they have not been rushed. Not because it was about me, because it was proof that she had been looking, really looking, since long before she said so. Because being drawn into someone's work is a particular kind of being seen, the kind that does not ask permission, the kind that just notices and records and keeps. I put the book on the shelf by the register, the place I keep the things I want near me. She comes back every day. She always has. It was never the books. And I would be lying if I said I hadn't known that for a while. I just needed to be a man who was brave enough to let a story of his own actually start. It turns out I am that man. It only took me 37 years and one sentence on a Tuesday in October to find out. Have you ever had someone keep returning to a place you were part of, and wondered whether you were the reason, and been afraid to find out? And has anyone ever told you the truth about something with such quiet certainty that you couldn't do anything but accept it? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.